Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the 2017 MacBook Pro and see how this particular, MacBook holds up in 2025. Now, number one, there are some really big things to keep in mind here. The 2017 Retina MacBook Pro is a, kind of an older type of MacBook, right? It's about 8 years old. And for a lot of people out there, it may not make a lot of sense to go through and buy this type of MacBook anymore. In fact, I would probably implore every single person out there to avoid purchasing a MacBook like this as of this point. It genuinely just does not make any sense whatsoever. These types of MacBooks have definitely shown their age. They're much older, but the problem is that they're not just older. They're actually kind of, showing their age more than even some other types of Macs that came out, that were 7 years old a few years ago. So I definitely will tell you, in my personal opinion, these types of Macs, they're very, interesting, but let's go and see how they hold up in 2025. If you want to pick up some Macs that I would personally recommend buying this year though, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of these particular MacBooks. The 2017 MacBooks originally came out back in 2017, who would have guessed it? And within these types of Macs, they were actually pretty good looking MacBooks. One thing you can never hate on with these Macs, in my personal opinion, was how they looked. These MacBooks looked amazing, they were very, very good looking, and I do personally feel like that is a really good advantage for these types of devices, because you're able to go through and pretty much pick up a Mac that's going to be giving you a pretty good type of experience from that build quality standpoint. These MacBooks also came out in two different sizes. They came out in a 13-inch size and a 15-inch size. So that right there was also another cool thing to basically have inside of a MacBook, is you were able to go through and choose whichever type of device size you actually wanted. And personally, I did like the 13-inch one. It was just more portable, and that one suited my style a little bit more. But it was also very cool because you were also able to go through and pick up some other types of Macs too, because they also gave you pretty good experiences. And if you wanted to get the 15-inch one, you had that type of capability there as well. So personally for me, I'm a big fan of these types of Macs, and I actually do think they held up fairly well when it came down to that side. Now you got the Apple logo at the very top. You got USB Type-C ports all throughout. So you were getting either 2 to 4 different USB Type-C ports depending on the Mac. So that right there was another really cool advantage here. You were able to essentially go through and pick up these types of Macs that were giving you that type of experience. And personally for me, I feel like if I was about to go through and pick up a Mac, that gives me a pretty good experience in and of itself. And, this was funny because when the M1 Pro MacBooks or the M1 MacBook Pros came out, those were only giving us 2 USB Type-C ports. So that was actually something that was very, very annoying. At least with these ones, you were getting a little bit more of a better experience here when it kind of came down to it. So personally for me, I think this thing on the exterior actually did kind of hold up fairly well from that particular perspective. Now, on top of that, another very big thing going on for these types of Macs too is the fact that within these types of MacBooks, you were also basically you were able to go through and get such a great build quality that it's not even funny. These types of MacBooks still feel very, very pricey. They still feel very good. And I do feel like this in and of itself is another really cool advantage for these types of devices when it comes down to it from that side as well. Now, on top of that, when you start opening up this MacBook, this is where things start getting very interesting. At the top, as we talked about before, this thing was basically giving you a 13-inch MacBook or a 15-inch display. The display itself was very good. It still is a very good looking display. You have the camera at the very front, and if you're about to go through and pick up a particular Mac, you are still going to be able to go through and get a very good type of experience and a very good type of build quality overall inside of this Mac compared to a lot of other devices out there. So I would say personally for me, that is a really nice advantage for these types of Macs, and I am a very big fan of this type of Mac when it comes down to it from that particular side. On the other hand, one interesting thing to kind of keep in mind here within these types of MacBooks is that with a 2017 Retina MacBook Pro, one of the biggest issues we were experiencing here was the keyboard. The keyboard on this MacBook was giving so many people so many issues, it's not even funny. A lot of people were experiencing these types of problems, and personally for me, I'm going to be honest, running into a problem where you're going to go through and have to use these types of keyboards over and over again is not really that good of an idea. right? Like that is kind of an issue. And I would say in and of itself, this was, these butterfly keyboards were giving so many people issues, including myself, and it really just wasn't a good idea in my personal opinion. So from that side as well, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. Now, on top of that, when you kind of go ahead and start looking behind the scenes of this Mac, one of the things I think a reason why people like this Mac so much is typically because these types of MacBooks are basically going to go through and they're very, very affordable, right? They're very cheap. They don't necessarily cost that much money to go and pick up anymore. And I do think a lot of people look at these types of MacBooks from that particular perspective, and they kind of want to go ahead and buy these types of Macs because they are going to be giving you that type of great experience. Now, I think that's a great thing. I think getting a used device or a cheaper device makes a lot of sense, but it really depends on the quality of that used device or the quality of that cheap device. With this type of MacBook, I'm going to be honest, I just don't think I would recommend anyone to go and buy a MacBook like this, even though it's so affordable and so cheap, because of the limitations in other areas. For one, this thing is not really going to be getting any more software updates for the most part for like that longer period of a time. So although it still is probably getting some security updates here and there, these next couple iterations of macOS, this Mac isn't already getting it. So that right there is already a downside. Like if you wanted to go through and pick up a Mac, you're already getting a limited experience inside of this type of device when it comes down to it. Also, when it kind of comes down to the performance, these things were basically giving you that Intel chipset, and you could spec it out to either 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, which is actually pretty, good. But for the everyday or the average person, this is just another one of those cases where I would look at, inside of these devices, and I just don't think this is a good device from that particular perspective either. I think these types of Macs, they're definitely showing their age. And I kind of ask you guys once again, it's like, what's the point of even buying these types of Macs if they're going to be giving you somewhat of like a limited type of experience from that side? And that's just kind of what I keep thinking to myself. For very basic stuff, this Mac is fine. Even for like more, complicated stuff, it depends too. But the 8GB of RAM option, it's just not really that good anymore. And that is essentially the main problem that you're going to be running into, right? Like if you're getting this type of Mac, you probably want to go through and buy a device that's going to be giving you a better type of experience. And that is essentially what's kind of going on here inside of these types of Macs as well, right? It's not a terrible performing Mac, like don't get me wrong, but there are better options out there. And that's kind of how I see these types of Macs holding up from that particular side when it kind of comes down to it. So in my personal opinion, when I go through and I look at something like a 2017 MacBook Pro, I just can't see in any situation why I would recommend anyone to go ahead and buy this type of Mac anymore. I think there are way better devices out there than this one. I would highly recommend buying something like an M1 MacBook Air or an M1 MacBook Pro. The standard 2020 model, those ones have gone down in value a lot. Those ones you can buy in the used market, they might be a couple $100 more than this thing, but it is worth it, right? With the 2017 MacBook Pro, you are going to feel like it's old within a week. The M1 MacBook Pro or M1 MacBook Air, it's still going to feel like a very fast machine, no matter what you really do with it. And I think that's a really big advantage for that type of Mac when it comes down to it from that side. So take it as you will, but for me personally, that's kind of how I see this particular Mac holding up in that particular perspective. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.